Following our series on character development, we're going to be looking at challenges, why they're so important, what they are, and how you can add them to your story. Defining challenge isn't as simple as it might seem at first, and that's mostly because what constitutes a challenge is very broad and quite subjective. In storytelling, a challenge is something that stops, prevents, or gets in the way of our protagonist reaching their goal. These can be a range of different things, from geography to antagonistic characters to mental and physical limitations or social pressures, and really the list goes on. But they're all important to include in order to build convincing character development. Challenges really are the core part of character development, because they are what forces the character to develop. A challenge stands in the way of our character reaching that final destination. They force them to change, to grow, to become creative in order to overcome the problem ahead of them. It's why when we were talking about our perfect characters, they can't be perfect because then there's no challenge and therefore there's no development. So a challenge is a really essential part of the story. It is what pushes our character to go beyond their limits, adopt new skills, and grow as a person. There's a reason we use the expression, failure is the best teacher. And that's because all of us understand that in the real world, the most prominent lessons within our lives are the times that we failed, the times that we've struggled, the times where something has been in our way and we've had to overcome it. These are often the most rewarding things in our life. And it's the reason that we love underdog stories. It's the reason we love and always root for the little guy in the fight, because we understand how great it feels to overcome a challenge. And that's the exact same reason why it's so important in storytelling too. Your characters need to have that challenge to push them and to help them grow and develop as a character. Challenges really speak to something within us, especially if this character is not perfect and they're flawed and they have all of these problems within them. Especially if they have that motivation behind them to get to that goal. And that's when the challenge becomes such an essential part of the story, and it can often be the climax. It's the ultimate part where the hero finally overcomes that challenge, is where we get the most satisfaction in storytelling. So how can we write that into our story? Well, I'm going to show you a few different ways that you can do that and a few of the essential elements that you need to include for a challenge, and I'm going to be using Star Wars as my example to illustrate this. The first point is that all challenges need to be set up before they occur. This is important for keeping your audience expectations and creating tension. Even if your character is ambushed, you at least need to remark or hint at the location they're in being hostile. This goes back to Hitchcock's famous ticking bomb analogy. If your reader doesn't know to expect the bomb exploding, they only get the surprise of the explosion and miss out on so many of the other emotions. Yet showing the bomb beforehand builds dread and tension, which is far more engrossing. As we spoke about in our contrivances video, having that setup helps you avoid creating a contrivance here, something that's just thrown in the way seemingly at random and breaking all the rules. Minor challenges that test and train the character naturally require less setup, maybe only a few lines. But the larger the challenge, the more you need to foreshadow it and hint about it to avoid it becoming contrived. In A New Hope, minor initial challenges, such as stormtroopers, are set up through exposition, such as Obi-Wan telling Luke,
"Only Imperial stormtroopers are so precise,"
and seeing their actions at Luke's home. This then builds a fear within us about the challenge Luke will have to face later. Major challenges like Darth Vader are introduced immediately into the story, and we understand as the audience that Luke will need to face this in the future when he's ready. The second point is that challenges need to be believable. As we discussed in the contrivances video, challenges have to be natural to the context, obey the rules, and believably overcome. If the gap is too large and is closed too quickly, it will break the reader immersion. The larger the challenge, the more setup it requires to beat, and therefore the more believable it will be. We'll talk about effort in the final part of this series, but for now we should acknowledge that challenges should be proportional to the scale of setup and time in order to maintain realistic expectations from the audience. The reader needs to believe that this challenge is genuine and not thrown in randomly, hence the need for setup. More than that, it needs to fit within the rules of the world you've established and not break them. Don't break the rules just to make a challenge more intimidating or difficult than it would naturally be, as this will make the reader feel as if the writer is making things unfair for no reason. In Star Wars, we're given enough information about the world that challenges such as stormtroopers and Darth Vader feel as if they would exist within it. Their strength is perfectly reasonable within the world and doesn't feel artificially inflated to create contrived challenges. It could be argued that stormtroopers are artificially weakened, and you'd be right, but that was a creative choice taken to allow the plot to exist. A contrivance to be sure, but perhaps a necessary one that the creator had to weigh up in their own mind. Challenges have to carry consequences, and while that word could have some negative connotations, I don't mean it to. Whatever the outcome from facing the challenge, our characters have to learn and change because of it, even if it's in a minor way. Only a perfect character gets through every struggle without it having any influence over them at all. Think about every challenge you've faced. It has always had an impact on you physically, mentally, or spiritually. The same has to be said in your story. The size of the impact should be proportional to the size of the challenge too, and in line with the character's background. Because challenges are so fundamental to the development of your character, you must clearly show how it's impacted them. They can learn from the challenges, be damaged by them, be strengthened or wounded. The choice is yours, but make sure that they react consistently with how you've designed them. Take the time to think about it before you commit. And remember to think about the effects on all the parties involved, how that will change their narrative and the world at large. The challenge of rescuing Leia from the Death Star and losing his mentor has a visible impact on Luke. He is saddened by it, but all the more resolute to join the rebellion and fight back against the Empire. It even breeds a hatred within him for Darth Vader that will be played on later. As a consequence, Luke is no longer the boy from Tatooine, but a soldier in a rebellion and a training Jedi. Similar to consequences, it's absolutely imperative that your protagonist fails during some of their challenges, in order to create convincing development to avoid contrivances and avoid perfect characters. This will usually be their biggest test and their lowest point within the story, but it's essential for showing them as a realistic and relatable character. It should also be near total failure that leaves them vulnerable and often in need of assistance. This builds tension and acts as the largest catalyst for them to complete their quest and grow as a character. It should go without saying that the failure will be the ultimate teacher for the protagonist and will ultimately play a large part in overcoming their ultimate challenge and achieving their goal by the end of the story. As a reader, we want to see them get back on their feet. We want them to become stronger because we want to believe that we can do the same. Perfect characters never lose, and none of us are perfect, so make sure your character loses something. The obvious example in Star Wars is Luke losing his first fight with Darth Vader, having his hand cut off, losing his lightsaber, and having his reality shattered at the revelation of his father's identity. This is a near total failure that necessitates him being rescued and leaves him broken but eager to finish his journey and bring his father back to the light. But as an audience member, it makes us believe that he's a real person, it makes him relatable, and it makes us root for him all the more. Of course, the final part of a challenge is overcoming it. In most stories, your protagonist will ultimately achieve some form of victory. Even in stories where they lose, like Rocky losing his fight, there should still be some sense of victory for the reader. That the character is now stronger, has beaten challenges, and emerges from the story a better person. Not perfect, just better. Of course, the ultimate challenge should never be easy, and the best are often a close-called affair that keeps the tension until the last moment. That being said, challenges need to be overcome if you want to communicate a positive message, like one of hope, for example. This should be where your protagonist has overcome a major hurdle that, when initially introduced, seemed impossible. There should be enough growth and development by the time they reach this point that we believe they could have reached that conclusion. That doesn't eliminate any consequences, of course, so they could be bittersweet like Rocky, with both victory and defeat all at once. But the ultimate challenge should be set aside. Of course, in Star Wars, this is Luke defeating Vader in their final duel, taking the moral victory by sparing his life, and then finally reconciling with his father after they've defeated the Emperor. So, just remember that challenge is the core, essential ingredient to building a character who develops over the course of their journey. Don't forget to include tough challenges, and you can include way more than one. Have lots of smaller challenges, big challenges, failures, and successes to build a comprehensive, well-rounded, and three-dimensional character. If you've enjoyed today's video, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the video with your friends, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.